Today's reading is from Psalm 86, verses 1 to 10 and verses 16 to 17. Hear me, Lord, and answer me, for I am poor and needy. Guard my life, for I am faithful to you. Save your servant who trusts in you. You are my God. Have mercy on me, Lord, for I call to you all day long. Bring joy to your servant, Lord, for I put my trust in you. You, Lord, are forgiving and good, abounding in love to all who call to you. Hear my prayer, Lord. Listen to my cry for mercy. When I am in distress, I call to you, because you answer me. Among the gods, there is none like you, Lord. No deeds can compare with yours. All the nations you have made will come and worship before you, Lord. They will bring glory to your name. For you are great and do marvelous deeds. You alone are God. Turn to me and have mercy on me. Show your strength on behalf of your servant. Save me, because I serve you, just as my mother did. Give me a sign of your goodness, that my enemies may see it and be put to shame. For you, Lord, have helped me and comforted me. This is the word of the Lord.
The next reading is from Matthew chapter 10, starting at verse 24 and going on to verse 39. Matthew chapter 10, verse 24. A student is not above his teacher, nor a servant above his master. It is enough for the student to be like his teacher, and the servant like his master. If the head of the house has been called Beelzebub, how much more the members of his household? So do not be afraid of them. There is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed, or hidden that will not be made known. What I tell you in the dark, speak in the daylight. What is whispered in your ear, proclaim from the roofs. Do not be afraid of those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather, be afraid of the one who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground apart from the will of your Father. And even the very hairs on your head are all numbered. So don't be afraid. You're worth more than many sparrows. Whoever acknowledges me before men, I will also acknowledge him before my Father in heaven. But whoever disowns me before men, I will disown him before my Father in heaven. Do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to turn a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies will be the members of his own household. Anyone who loves his father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves his son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And anyone who does not take his cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds his life will lose it. And whoever loses his life for my sake, will find it. This is the word of the Lord.
So let's start with a prayer before we dive into these passages. Dear Lord, be with us today. Help us to learn more about you as we explore your word and open our eyes to you as we look together at these passages. Amen. Have you ever had to prepare someone for really quite a difficult task? It might be a work project, maybe a sports match. Maybe you actually had to get someone ready for a new job, or help someone prepare to be a parent. It's a massive change. Did you find that you kind of focus more on the good things or the challenges? Were you afraid that if you said too much about the hard parts, you might scare them off? In today's passage in Matthew's Gospel, Jesus is preparing his 12 disciples to go on a really big mission. The reading last Sunday finished with Jesus telling his disciples that he wanted them to go. He gave them the authority to do what he had been doing. He said, "As you go, proclaim this message. The kingdom of heaven has come near. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those who have leprosy, drive out demons. Freely you have received, freely give." So a very big commission for them. This week, we're later on in the conversation. Jesus has told his disciples what he wants them to do, and now he's giving them some advice on how to do it and a warning on what to expect when they go and do it. One key thing about Jesus' instructions and warning is that he really didn't sugarcoat it. He was very clear about the difficulties that would be faced, and not to mention all the sacrifices involved. He really wanted to make sure his disciples were prepared. He didn't try and lure them in with false promises just to get more disciples. He told them completely honestly how hard it would be. He wanted people who were really committed and really understood what they were committed to. So just imagine for a while being one of the disciples at this time. You've been following Jesus, listening to his teachings, watching him perform these amazing miracles. You've seen the highs and lows. You've grown in your faith. You've probably been enjoying this amazing ride, the excitement, thinking, wow, isn't this wonderful being a part of this? But then Jesus turns around and says, now it's your turn. Maybe, to be topical, it's like you've been following the England men's football team all year. You've gone to their matches and cheered them on, but then you turn up to the World Cup and Harry Kane comes up and says, "You've been supporting us all this time. You know how to do it. This time, it's your turn to play." However much you might like the idea, I don't think anyone here would feel at all ready to play football for England. And this gives an insight into how the disciples probably felt. I'm sure the idea of being able to follow Jesus' example was exciting, but they must have wondered how they could possibly do what Jesus did. The bold and insightful teaching would be hard enough, but miracles as well? Surely only Jesus could do that. How is it possible that they could do that? But Jesus specifically gave them his authority to teach and to heal in his name, to do things they could not otherwise have done. Those things that we mentioned so casually, to heal, to raise from the dead. That is not little things, that is things that would be impossible for us normally. And Jesus gave them the authority to do that. Jesus is very clear on the challenges in following in his footsteps. He talks about how much we may have to sacrifice for him. He told his disciples, "I'm sending you out like sheep among wolves." And the disciples would have witnessed some really angry responses to Jesus' teaching and lots of threats to his own safety. So they did know that this was true. This was absolutely not scaremongering. Jesus talks about the persecution to be faced from those who oppose his message. And he says that some Christians will even lose their lives for him. And I'm sure, like me, you would think that's really hard to hear. It's something that all of us will struggle with, and I'm sure those first disciples struggled with it too. But the thing is that Jesus actually understands how hard it is because he went through it first. And that's what's amazing about Jesus, is that he doesn't ask us to do something that he hasn't done. I'm sure you all know the infamous parent phrase, "Do what I say and not what I do." Well, he didn't do that. He did the hard work first. And he called the disciples and then later all of us to follow in his footsteps and to follow that hard path already trodden by him. Today's psalm offers some help with how to deal with hard situations. This is a psalm of King David, and it shows David calling out to God for help. There are a few things from the psalm which can really help us. Firstly, David is really honest with God, just as Jesus was honest with us. He makes it clear just how bad he's feeling and really pours out his heart to God. He said, "Hear my prayer, Lord. Listen to my cry for mercy. When I am in distress, I call out to you because you answer me." So when we're struggling, God asks us to pour out our heart to him. And he really wants us to tell him how we're feeling. And just step back for a moment to think how amazing that is. That the God who created this vast universe that is so much bigger than our comprehension actually wants to hear from each of us. We're so tiny compared to the whole universe, but we're still really important to him, and he wants to hear our day-to-day struggles. Secondly, David asks for God's help. It's very clear from the psalm that David's past experience is that God always listens. He says, "When I am in distress, I call out to you because you answer me." However, an important point to note is this actually doesn't mean that God took away all David's trouble, because we actually know quite a bit about the story of David from other parts of the Bible. And we know from his story that he had many long periods of hardship and a lot of suffering. So God does answer our prayers, but it's often not the answer we want or expect. His answer may be that we need to wait, which is really challenging. Or it might be that he will support us through the troubles. And it is so hard when we want a very specific answer to a prayer, and it doesn't happen. But often, actually, when we look back, we find that God has answered our prayer, but just in a different way to how we were expecting. Maybe he sent us someone to give us some comfort. Maybe he used that time to help us learn to rely on him more. Because if he always solved our problems instantly, we wouldn't have the time to need to rely on him and to learn that he is the one ultimately we need to rely on. And this does seem to have been King David's experience. He ends the psalm by saying, "For you, Lord, have helped me and comforted me." And the other really amazing thing about this psalm that really struck me is in the midst of David's pain, he starts praising God. Most people, when you're feeling rubbish, you're just thinking, But the beginning and the end of Psalm are the calls for help, and the middle is the praise of God. He says, I will praise you, Lord, with all my heart. I will glorify your name forever. And it can be really hard to praise God when times are hard. And it's not really our natural instinct. But if we're able to, praising God during hard times can actually be really powerful. Firstly, it can help us focus more on God and help us to just connect more with God. But secondly, it reminds us how amazing God is and how much bigger he is than anything else. It's a reminder that God is more powerful than the darkness in the world. And a previous thing I preached on it talked about God, the darkness of the world being so light when God is around because the darkness is just light around him. And God is able to help us with any problem. And ultimately, he will defeat all the evil we see around us. However amazing and impossible that seems, that is what he will do. So this brings us back nicely to Jesus' words in our passage in Matthew. In verses 26 to 28, Jesus reminds his disciples that God is so much bigger than the people who oppose them in life. He reminds them that people on earth can hurt your body, but they can't touch your eternal soul. And that people who do evil on earth will eventually face God's eternal justice. Just think about the people who terrorize others on earth in small ways or in big ways. Maybe someone you don't know. Maybe you think of people who you do know. Maybe the person from the school bully, or to the really famous or infamous leaders such as Hitler. They may have a lot of earthly power for a while, but in the end, their power is or will be taken away from them. Think about the people who are currently using their power to cause suffering. And I know there are many around who are doing that. But now think of how much bigger and more powerful God is than them. They may be able to do terrible things on earth for a while, but their power is nothing compared to God's. And eventually, it is God's time that will come. When it comes to dealing with resistance on earth, it's also really important to remember that different Christians face different levels of persecution and in different ways. Some Christians will still today face serious physical danger for being a Christian. There are some parts of the world where just admitting to being a Christian or even owning a Bible could lead to execution or a really long prison sentence. It just happens that in our country at this moment, we are incredibly lucky that we're able to be a Christian openly. But even in this country, Christians will have varied experiences of talking about Jesus. Some people will experience rejection by their family or friends. Some might encounter ridicule or angry arguments. Some will more experience indifference or the "that's nice for you" reaction. This passage is not trying to describe the exact journey of every Christian. It doesn't mean every Christian will be persecuted in exactly the same way or to the same extent. Jesus is specifically addressing his disciples, who he knew would receive a lot of persecution. But his basic warning does apply to all his future followers, that his message will not always be well received. Even though sometimes, by some people, it will be well received, but by many, it won't be. And that's where he divides, because some people receive his message well and some won't. But however, depending on where you live and who you're talking to, sharing the gospel can get very different reactions, from indifference to your life being in serious danger. It is so easy to compare ourselves to others and to think we're doing something wrong if we're not experiencing the same level of persecution as someone else. But the fact is, We all happen to be in different circumstances in life. We're all born to be where we are and who we are. So instead, it's important to focus on our own circumstances and what we can do to follow Jesus' instructions to spread his good news. And all he asks for each of us is to be faithful in our own circumstances on the path that he has laid out for each of us, whatever that may be. But often we can find that talking about Jesus to non-Christians is hard. I often get that. We're aware of the possibility of bad reactions, and that can be really scary. So a good place to start is to talk to God about it. Just be really open about how you're feeling, what scares you about it. And to know that Jesus knows how difficult it can be because he did it first. And he experienced the difficult reactions and the persecution. And if it feels daunting, maybe try starting with just one small step. If you found it hard to tell a colleague at work that you're a Christian, maybe when you chat with them, you could just when you talk about what you did about the weekend, you could just include saying that you went to church. Or you could tell someone going through a hard time that you prayed for them. If you start in a really little way, over time, it's amazing how much it could build up. And you never know when just a little thing like that might open up a conversation that you just didn't dream could happen. So in conclusion, Jesus is sending us out to spread his good news to those around us, just as he sent out his 12 disciples. However, he is not asking us to do something he hadn't done himself. He not only showed us the way, but he also really understands how hard it is. He was realistic about what it would involve. He warned that we're likely to face pushback from the world. This could be serious persecution, it could be ridicule, it could be scorn, it could be so many other things. However, he also welcomes us to come to him when we are struggling. As Sharon was saying earlier, he's always there, even when you don't feel like he is. He wants us to call out to him for help, and also to remember that he is so much more powerful than the people we fear on earth. Maybe we could pray that God will give us the desire to spread the gospel, and that he might give us an opportunity to take a step in talking about Jesus this week. So let's finish with a prayer. Lord, thank you for showing us how to be a follower by walking your path first. Help us to grow in confidence, to talk to others about you. Help us to know that you are always with us, whether we feel it or not. Help us to always be able to talk to you, to call out to you in difficulty, and to know that you really understand how we feel. Amen.